Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. Today we're going to be looking at the Knight's Tale, which is actually the very first story that's told on the pilgrimage by the knight. Each of the tales is named after the person that tells it. The story, here's a picture of the knight in the front of that group. And in the prologue, the knight is described by Chaucer as being very honorable and chivalrous, being of great military prowess, and yet humble. So he's an all-around good and noble figure, probably almost more so than anybody else on the pilgrimage. The story that he tells takes place around the year 750 BC in ancient Greece. So Greece is on this map in purple, and I'll zoom in on that a little bit. Now it's in orange. And it involves the city of Athens and Thebes. So, Duke Theseus is the ruler of Athens, and he had defeated the Amazons. By the way, Duke Theseus in legend is also the one who was the slayer of the Minotaur. You might have heard the tale before of how the King Minos of Crete would extract he had kind of subdued the Athenians, and their tribute was that they had to send a certain number of young people each year to Crete to be fed to the Minotaur, which was a creature that he held in his labyrinth. So one year, Theseus, wanting to be rid of this, went on the journey himself. He was the son of the king of Athens, and basically got to the center of the labyrinth and killed the Minotaur, thus freeing the Athenians from the need to send their young people to their deaths. Anyway, Theseus goes back to Athens after that and becomes king, and there's going to be a war with Thebes, which is a nearby city, so just keep that in mind. So this story starts, though, that he had just finished a war against the Amazons. The Amazons are a race of woman warriors, and he brought home their queen, Hippolyta, as his wife, along with her sister Emily. So he was bringing home these two women back from the battle with the Amazons, and he's married Hippolyta, and Emily is her sister, and he's brought her back also. On the way home, they meet a group of women who are weeping by the roadside. Their husbands had been killed in battle with the evil King Creon, who was the king of Thebes, a nearby city to Athens. Creon had been fighting against their husbands. He was the king of Thebes. After he had defeated them, he had piled their husbands' bodies up on the plain outside of the city of Thebes and forbade anyone to bury them or burn them, but was allowing the wild dogs to eat the bodies. So this is his way of kind of getting back at them for opposing him. And by the way, this story is also told in the famous stories from ancient Greece, the Seven Against Thebes, which is the story about why their husbands were fighting against Creon in the first place, and Antigone, which was about Creon's daughter who wants to bury her brother, I think, and she wants to bury somebody that's dear to her that was in that pile of bodies, and Creon won't let her. And all right. Anyway, so Theseus, at hearing what these women are complaining about, he vows that he will go to war against Creon and defeat him, so that the women's husbands can be buried, and he proceeds to do that. He has a war against Creon, and he defeats Creon, and then proceeds to bury the woman's husbands and burn them also, or one or the other. So that's how it starts, all right, is that Theseus is on his way home from having defeated the Amazons. He decides to help these women who could not bury their husbands because they had been defeated by Creon. He defeats Creon in battle and then helps them to properly bury or burn their husbands, as the case may be. In the process of fighting Creon, though, he takes 2 prisoners that are knights from Creon's army, and their names are Palamon and Arcite. And he takes them at the battle. He finds them unconscious, and he puts them in prison. He realizes that they, by their markings on their clothing, that they are dukes or noblemen from Thebes, and therefore he's not going to take any ransom for them, but he's going to hold them forever in prison. So their prison cell sits in the tower of Theseus's castle in Athens, with a window which overlooks his palace garden. In his palace garden is also roaming daily another person that was brought back from a battle, which is Emily, the sister of Theseus's wife Hippolyta. She was an Amazon. Her and her sister Hippolyta were brought back after Theseus defeated the Amazons, and they're not exactly prisoners because her sister is Theseus's wife. But she's a prisoner in a way. She's taken from her home country, and now she's in a strange new country, and she spends her days just wandering the garden and picking flowers. So the imprisoned Palamon wakes early one morning. So again, the 2 knights that were captured from Thebes are Palamon and Arcite. Palamon and Arcite. The imprisoned Palamon wakes early one morning in May and catches sight of Emily, who is Theseus' sister-in-law, below in the courtyard outside the prison, picking flowers for a garland. He instantly falls in love with her, wondering if she is human or a goddess. His moan is heard by Arcite, his cousin, who then also awakes, he's also a prisoner, and sees Emily, and he also instantly falls in love with her as well. So, their mutual love for Emily actually leads to a dispute. Palamon is angered as he believes that he had claimed Emily first. But Arcite argues that he also loved Emily before it was even established that she was human, because as you remember, Palamon originally thought she might be a goddess. And he adds that love obeys no rules anyways. The friendship between Palamon and Arcite quickly deteriorates over their competition for Emily. After some years, Arcite is released from prison through the help and advice of Perotheus, a mutual friend of Theseus and Arcite, commuting Arcite's sentence from imprisonment to exile. Exile means that he is never allowed to return to Athens again on pain of death, but other than that, he's free. So, Arcite is not exactly happy about this, though. He thinks, I was actually better off when I was in prison, because at least in prison I could see my lady daily. I could see Emily daily, the one that I love, and look at her anyway. But now here I am, I'm permanently exiled away from the place where she lives, from Athens, and I can never see her again. Meanwhile, Palamon is thinking, this is horrible because now Arcite is free. He will be able to go back to Thebes and raise an army and come and defeat Theseus and then claim Emily as his wife. And here I am stuck in prison and can't do anything, even though Palamon gets to see Emily every day from the prison window. So Arcite, though, he doesn't raise an army. Instead, Arcite returns as disguised as a servant. Arcite laments that being away from Emily is worse than imprisonment, and he envies Palamon, who is stuck in prison, yet can see his love, Emily, daily. Arcite later secretly returns to Athens in disguise and enters service in Emily's household to get close to her. So he's dressed up. He dresses himself up not as a nobleman, which is what he is, but as a servant, and looks for a job, basically working for Theseus's household, and becomes a servant to Theseus and his family, especially so he can be close to Emily and see her every day. But he's in disguise, so nobody knows that. Meanwhile, Palamon is still stuck in Theseus's prison. He envies Arcite, who is now free, and he assumes that Arcite will get an army together from their home country, Thebes, and come back to fight against Theseus to defeat him and win Emily for his wife. Palamon eventually escapes from prison by drugging the jailer, while hiding in a grove of trees, he overhears Arcite singing about love and fortune. So, and specifically he's singing about love of Emily, which upsets Palamon. So they begin to duel with each other over who should get Emily. And they get into a big fight, but they are thwarted by the arrival of Theseus's hunting party in the woods. Theseus stops the fight and plans to sentence the two of them to execution, to be killed, because they've violated their agreement. Arcite was not to come back on pain of death, and Palamon, of course, escaped illegally. But both Hippolyta and Emily, his wife and his sister-in-law, plead with him to have mercy on Arcite and Palamon. So he decides that instead of putting them to death instantly, he will hold a tournament for them, and whichever one of them wins the tournament will get Emily, and I guess the other one will be put to death. So the rules are that Palamon and Arcite will have 1 year to gather together 100 men, apiece, and then they will fight in a mass judicial tournament against each other. The two armies, 100 on each side, 100 for Palamon, 100 for Arcite, will fight against each other in a tournament, and the winner will get to marry Emily. So they take off and they spend their year gathering together the best knights they can find, and they come back after 1 year with their armies assembled, ready to fight in a vast judicial tournament. And the idea of a judicial tournament is that the two armies will fight against each other, or the two men would fight against each other, and whichever one wins is in the right, because that would be the will of God. So in other words, it's allowing, in a situation where you're not sure who's the right one or who's right, having a tournament allows divine intervention to make the decision for you. So before the tournament, there are prayers. The forces are assembled 1 year later and lavishly banqueted by Theseus. On the early morning before the tournament, Palamon prays to Venus to make Emily his wife. Venus is, of course, the goddess of love. Emily prays to Diana to remain unmarried or else to marry the one who truly loves her, which is probably both of them. And Arcite prays to Mars, the god of war, for victory. Each of them receives certain signs while they're saying their prayers, which are of uncertain meaning. It could be interpreted either way. They could be interpreted positively to mean they're going to win the battle, or they could be interpreted negatively to mean they might lose. So, after that, the tournament rules. Here's one of the signs that's coming to Arcite. The altar flames up in front of him. So, after that, the rules of the tournament are laid out by Theseus. He says that if any man of the 200 that are going to be participating becomes seriously injured, he must be dragged out of the battle and withdraw from the combat. Because of this, the narrator, the knight, claims that there were no deaths on either side. Then the jousting tournament begins. Although Palamon and Arcite fight valiantly against each other with their armies, Palamon is wounded by a chance sword thrust from one of Arcite's men, and is unhorsed. He's thrown off of his horse. Theseus, the king of Athens, declares the fight over. Arcite has won the battle, and he's going to come up to get his prize for winning the battle. As he rides up to receive his prize, which would be Emily as his wife, Saturn, one of the other pagan gods, supposed to be the I think the father of all the gods, intervenes on Venus's side, and as Arcite is riding up to receive the honors of the winner, his horse throws him off and falls on top of him, leaving him mortally wounded before he can even claim Emily as his prize. So Arcite is taken to his bed to die and be tended to. And as he's dying in bed, he tells Emily that she should marry Palamon because he would make a good husband for her. After a heroic burial for Arcite and a period of mourning, Theseus proclaims that Palamon should marry Emily, and thus all three prayers are fulfilled. Arcite had prayed that he would win the battle, which he did. And Palamon had prayed to Venus to make Emily his wife, which did happen. And Emily prays that the one who truly loves her would marry her, which also happened. So, the themes in this story, there's four main themes that I can identify, and there may be more that you could identify too. The first one, though, and I think the most obvious one, is courtly love versus chivalry. These are kind of two big themes of medieval literature that run through a lot of medieval literature. Courtly love versus chivalry. And you can see this happen also in the King Arthur stories, right? Courtly love versus chivalry, like Guinevere and Lancelot versus the knights that are out there doing selfless and good deeds to protect people. So two value systems, courtly love and chivalry, come into conflict with each other in this story. Both knights are in love with a girl that they cannot attain. That's basically the definition of courtly love. And hold her as the only ideal. This is courtly love. They both are knights and believe in fighting for the good, against evil, honesty, loyalty, and bravery. That's what chivalry is. The end result is that courtly love drives them to fight against each other, and they are kin and have sworn an oath of friendship to each other, so it kind of violates their oath of friendship, in a knightly tournament causing Arcite's death. The second theme is love at first sight and love causing suffering. So both of them fall in love with Emily before they even know who she is or anything about her. They don't even know if she's human at first, except that she is beautiful. This apparently trumps reason and their ability to keep their oath and value their kinship, right? Which have some, the fact that they were cousins of each other should have some hold with them too, right? But apparently love at first sight is more powerful than that. This love for Emily afflicts them like a disease of the mind, causing them to suffer. Even after being released from prison, they can't get over her and they must come back and get her somehow. So, and this is also, love at first sight is also a part of courtly love, right? And I think it would be appropriate to say that courtly love as a way of thinking and as a way of behaving is a form of disease, right? It's kind of rooted in a sinful idea of what love is rather than a true idea of what love is. The third theme is fate versus free will. So fate being like that what's going to happen to you is predetermined and there's nothing you can do about it, kind of like predestination. And free will meaning that you do have choices in life and the choices you make help you to get where you're going, right? So the story raises questions about the extent to which human beings can control their destinies. Despite their efforts and noble intentions, the characters are ultimately subject to the whims of the gods, suggesting that some forces are beyond human control. So in other words, they had their tournament between Arcite and Palamon, and even though Arcite won, he still lost because as he's going up to get his trophy, which is Emily, Saturn causes his horse to be thrown up into a fury and fall on top of him, basically killing him. So even though he won, he lost, and there was nothing he could do about it because it was the will of the gods. And so it raises a question of that how much control do we really have of our lives, right? It's sometimes not as much as we think we do. Sometimes things happen to us that we can't control, and there's no way to there's no way for us to counteract it in a way that will make everything all right. So, and the fourth theme is that might makes right to a certain extent. Theseus, this pops up several times in the story, right? Theseus uses his might to defeat the evil Creon, right? And so he sees that Creon's doing a bad thing by not allowing those women to bury their husbands. So he defeats him in a battle and puts justice on them, and he also allows the women to bury their husbands. He also sets up a jousting tournament as a judgment of who is right between Arcite and Palamon. So in other words, Arcite and Palamon, he's not sure which one should get Emily, and so he makes it a jousting tournament and basically to let the gods decide, right? Or maybe let decide who's the strongest. However, ultimately the greatest fighter, which is apparently Arcite because he wins the battle, is not the victor because ultimately we humans don't have complete control over what happens to us. In this story, the gods decide to mortally wound Arcite after his victory, making Palamon the default winner of Emily even though he lost the tournament. So this comes back to the idea that we must be resigned to our fate as determined by God ultimately.